Zeitgeist debunked again. Now we're going to be focusing on the third part this time, the New World Order. This covers the Federal Reserve a lot because they claim a lot of things about it being illegitimate and against the Constitution. But let's start off with a little background. It's good to note that from 1837 to 1862, when banks did issue their own banknotes backed by their gold and silver, they were unstable, they didn't last more than 5 years, a lot of them, and a third of the banks failed. So this really shows how, without the Federal Reserve, a lot of banking really did fail in America, and in a lot of countries for that matter, and how important the Federal Reserve is. But let's tackle their first point. The Federal Reserve takes interest on what they loan. That's not actually true at all. That's a flat-out lie. The truth is the Federal Reserve rebates its net earnings to the Treasury every year. The Treasury never needs to pay back interest on money that it loaned from the Federal Reserve. It's completely fraudulent. And you can even look at annual reports from the Federal Reserve showing how they pay back the Treasury. I took a little snippet from 94 to 97 right here to show you. It's not always on par with the interest, but it is quite close and it averages out. So yes, the Federal Reserve is private, but it's controlled by publicly appointed board of governors. So it's not really a private bank. The Federal Reserve undergoes actually many audits, and this is a requirement under the Federal Banking Agency Audit Act. In fact, the requirement allows specific people and specific private organizations to audit the Federal Reserve, and you can actually see those audits online. A little history on the Federal Reserve, as Zeitgeist does challenge our current Federal Reserve based on how it was actually put into place originally. In fact, to quote them, by the early 20th century, the U.S. had already implemented and removed a few central banking systems which were swindled into place by ruthless banking interests. Big number on the Federal Reserve. However, it's untrue. The U.S. bank, first chartered by Congress, was proposed by Alexander Hamilton, an important founding father. It was the first central bank the U.S. had. It was a good choice, in fact. The next central bank, so after the charter for the first one expired, the next one, 5 years later, was chartered, and this was founded by James Monroe, a friend of Thomas Jefferson. You know, these aren't small people. These are really important people in U.S. history. Now, they say that J.P. Morgan incited panic to discredit banks in 1907 to get the Federal Reserve. In fact, the stock market crash occurred early in 1907 and later that year in October, and that's what caused the massive recall on loans and the panic. It didn't happen because Morgan released some kind of rumor like Zeitgeist tries to establish. In fact, you can try looking for it if you'd like. The next claim Zeitgeist makes is that 2 days before Christmas, when most of Congress was at home with their families, the Federal Reserve Act was voted in, and Wilson in turn made it law. Almost like they swindled the Federal Reserve Act in, right? Wrong. It passed the House on December 22nd, 1913, with 298 in favor, 60 not in favor, and 76 didn't vote. Even with those 76 voting not in favor, it still passed. It still would have passed. The Senate passed it with 43 in favor, 25 not in favor, and 27 not voting. Now, Black Tuesday. Zeitgeist claims that Rockefeller, Morgan, Chase, other people tried to cause this Black Tuesday. In fact, they actually tried to stop it, and they did momentarily, almost for a day. So instead of giving them credit, Zeitgeist is now besmirching their names, which is kind of sad. And you can look that up for yourself. Now, income tax. A lot of people love this part of Zeitgeist, hoping that income tax really isn't true. However, it is. Now, Zeitgeist says that all direct taxes have to be apportioned to be legal based on the Constitution. However, they don't know the 16th Amendment eliminates the requirement that direct income must be apportioned. This is an exception, and this is where income tax comes into play. Now, they try and say, or most people try and say, that the 16th Amendment wasn't ratified, but it was by 38 states, which is certainly qualifying for a 3/4 majority. It was proposed on July 12, 1909, and was passed 1,302 days later. Now, Zeitgeist claims that the income tax laws don't exist. They do. They're under Title 26, where you can find all the information about them, all the people they apply to, and that you indeed must file. So those former IRS agents really probably should take a second look. And you can look them up for yourselves. It's right there. We'll quickly look at how the Federal Reserve really didn't force any wars. However, we are running low on time, so we'll only be looking really at the first war quickly. Now, Zeitgeist claims in 1914 European wars broke out, the US administration was looking for any excuse it could find to enter it, and that apparently was the sinking of the Louisiana, which was purposeful. However, the US did wait. In fact, they waited until April 1917. This was almost 2 years after the Louisiana was sunk. Clearly not the reason. Now let's quickly look at the North American Union and the Amero that Zeitgeist kind of brings up as their next point. So, the idea is actually from Toward a North American Community by Robert A. Pastor, and this was a hypothetical idea he puts forward that was clearly taken as fact. Now, Zeitgeist says that things will happen overnight or in secret. In fact, you can't change the US economy in secret. It would affect way too many countries. It would be literally impossible. The European Union took years to make and switch people over. In fact, it wouldn't make sense, as the US dollar is one of the most trusted dollars in existence. Just worth mentioning that a lot of quotes in Part 3 especially are fake, and you really should look them up for yourself. Aaron Rousseau, in fact, is a conspiracy theorist, and he makes his own documentaries. Apparently he knew the Rockefellers and knew they were planning September 11th. It's a little scary he didn't say anything before this happened, though. Zeitgeist's big claim is that RFID technology will replace money. Now, I've spoken to classes at the University of Waterloo, and I've worked on quite a few projects on RFID technology, so I feel like I do have the breadth of knowledge to cover this topic. You will be able to look up everything that I do speak about. There's a lot of hype about RFID technology, probably why Zeitgeist talks about it. But it's good to know that passive tags, that's the tags without batteries, the ones that most people use, the ones that can penetrate non-metallic surfaces, low-frequency tags, have to actually be read within 1 foot. That's not too useful for tracking the world. Ultra-high frequency, which do have longer range, have to have direct line of sight. They have to be directly looking at the tag. Another problem, big problem, is that they're absorbed by water. That means fruit, Coke, or a person really breaks the line of sight for these kinds of readers, making them quite impractical to do what Zeitgeist claims. Another good point is that German passports have even been cloned within 2 weeks by Louis Grunwald, a security expert, so I don't know how they could actually be used for a monetary system so easily. It's also worth noting that with the amount of people and RFID tags, there would be collisions. That's when signals overlay, making them pretty much unreadable in this kind of scenario, making it impractical to use RFID. In fact, why do they even need RFID to control citizens? If you think about it, a bank account could be emptied quite easily. They could foreclose on a person's house. They could give them bad credit. In reality, this kind of person has no buying power. They have no money left. They could give them a criminal record so they couldn't work. In fact, they could probably kill them with much more ease, to be honest. Quite sad. But it doesn't happen nowadays. For good reason. They don't need to. And they don't want to. That's not the purpose of the government, and that's not the purpose of some sort of Federal Reserve bank. I hope you see how Zeitgeist lied blatantly in Part 3, even though I couldn't cover everything in the 10 minutes. I hope you research everything I've said, and the Zeitgeist movie. Take the Zeitgeist challenge. If you'd like, you can see my other videos on math and science, and I really do hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching.